nivel y recursos modernos. Postula para nuestras carreras de bibliotecología, educación inicial o educación básica. No pierdas esta oportunidad de mejorar tu perfil profesional. Universidad Técnica de Manabí. Tu futuro empieza aquí.
Santiago Quirós Fernández, rector.
¿Quieres avanzar en tu carrera profesional? Descubre nuestra oferta de posgrado en la Universidad Técnica de Manabí.
A cargo de NESTERENKO, quien cumple un amplio currículo en el mundo de la academia. Sin embargo, vamos a hacer un pequeño resumen de su amplio historial académico. Full degree, Master of Science Philology, Higher Education Studies, Taras Shevchenko en Kiev State University in Kyiv, Ukraine. Okay? Faculty, Romance, Germanic Language and Foreign Literature. Language, Russian, Ukrainian, Spanish, and English. Professional experience in higher education. UTPL, English teacher, since October 1922 to the present. Top component, methodology of EFL teaching, phonology, pronunciation, English phonetic and phonology, contrastive phonetics of English and Spanish, American and British, literature, teaching reading and writing, morphology, teaching technique, introduction to applied linguistics, language testing, discourse analysis, master's program, teacher of component, applied linguistics and cross-cultural awareness. Participant in several national and international conferences and congress. 2012, studied the course assessment in EFL teaching, University of Oregon, USA. 2005, 2014, 2016, 2022, 2024, spokesperson in national and international, Bogota, Colombia. Congress for EFL teachers with various topics related to teaching culture, new language, new culture, new thinking, teaching culture as fifth language skills, assessment in EFL teaching, aligning learning strategies, and outlined learning objectives and outline them. With assessment type strategies, etc. El tema que ella nos va a exponer es Pragmatism and Discourse Analysis. Estimada,
It was yesterday topic.
Estimada Nina, un gusto tenerla como ponente en esta conferencia magistral. Esperamos nutrirnos de su conocimiento.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I feel really flattered by invitation by this prestigious University of Malta, and I very proudly represent UTPL, for which I have been working for over 30 years. But today I'm going to speak about intercultural competence. Pragmatics I explained in yesterday presentation. So today I'm going to focus on intercultural communication. Well, okay, so if possible, I can share the screen with my presentation. Well, and as I said, I feel very flattered by your invitation, and I'd like to share with you some of my knowledge based on my experience, investigation, research, and my own observation, due to probably because I belong to another culture. So for me, it's another way of experience this effect of being in contact with different cultures. Okay, so today I'm going to focus on intercultural competence for English foreign language learning and why it is important nowadays, because today it becomes kind of like a necessity, not only to learn grammar, vocabulary, phonology, phonetics, but also be culturally or interculturally competent in communication. Well, to start my presentation, I'd like to announce some of the topics that I'm going to address today. I'm going to focus on what culture is, explain concepts of competence and intercultural competence, links between culture and communication and why it is so important, Well, in communication in high, low context cultures, probably new terms for you, but actually this is exactly, this topic explains exactly why we sometimes misunderstand someone from another culture, and it may result in clash between cultures and misunderstandings and other concepts that I'm going to focus. Differences, the role of intercultural competence, including verbal, non-verbal, very briefly, I'm going to mention, and such concepts like ethnocentrism, stereotyping, empathy, and their role for intercultural communication, and obviously why do English foreign language students need to achieve intercultural competence. Okay, so let's get started. Well, to begin my conversation, to begin this explanation, I would like to start with a historical fact. This is a Queen Elizabeth when she was in 1953, when she became a queen, a very young age. And you know that Great Britain had a different commonwealths of parts of world that belonged to Great Britain. So she decided to visit those countries that represented commonwealths of Great Britain. And one of them, it was New Zealand. Obviously, this lady was instructed in cultural differences. And why I'm saying this? When she landed on that in New Zealand, and she found people who gathered to greet her with these expressions. Yeah, so anyone could become scared or feel offended without knowing what this gesture and expression really means. And really, it really means in this tribe, Maori. Maori, it's a native people of New Zealand and some part of Australia, but mostly New Zealand. So this is its utmost expression of respect to someone. Yeah, so they wanted to express their respect to their queen. That's why they used this non-verbal communication, expressing her greeted her this way. Yeah, so without knowing these differences, any person could become really scared. Well, so that's why how it's important to be culturally knowledgeable of those differences. Well, also I'd like to very briefly address the meaning of word culture that actually comes from Latin word meaning growing or cultivation, well, or also cultivation of mind, faculties on manners. And another very important aspect of culture that it is not acquired, it is not innate ability. Nobody is born belonging to this or that culture. How we identify ourselves to be Ecuadorians, Russians, Americans, Australians, whatever, it's because through transmitted knowledge that comes from our parents and people who surround us. Consequently, the cultural aspect is a result of human interaction. And as I said, is not innate, it's acquired or learned ability or knowledge. Well, and very briefly, I would like to show these images with you because in one single word is not possible to define culture, express what culture is. As you can see at these images, clothes, it's from India, folk dress of Mongolia, and this is probably you can recognize Ecuadorian culture, even if you don't belong to this ethnicity, but you can recognize, and also famosa humita, motecito, right? But this is probably you don't know what it is because it's Ukrainian food, a typical Ukrainian. And also, if we see this image, you can recognize probably part of your celebration of your new year, right? And Indian celebration. And so speaking about, this is Brazilian Carnival, Thanksgiving in the United States. So this is how culture works and what it represents, how it can be defined, in other words, right? But it's not all. Culture is much more than that, just this. It also comes to architecture. It's Ukrainian, Africa, North American Indians, Asian, pagodas. This is actually a church in my native Kiev, an opera house in my native Kiev, and this is Amsterdam, and so on, India, Taj Mahal, and so on, United States, Times Square. Well, but it's not all. Speaking about culture, we also need to speak about beauty standards. and how people perceive beauty. So for us, maybe this is not acceptable appearance, but for those people, this is a pretty handsome guy. And this is New Zealand, you already know, Maori. This is a standard beauty of African Maasai tribe. And actually, these are women, not men, women. They shave their heads because it is according to their beauty standards. And another African tribe, Japanese geisha with extreme makeup. And this is part of Burma, the so-called long-necked women who enlarge their neck, starting with in very young age, introducing one ring, another ring, and so on. And with age, they achieve this very long neck. Actually, it cannot be taken off, because if you take off this, so she can break her neck. Yeah, so it's not possible. It's Indonesia. If you saw image of Buddha, so you can see how it resembles Buddha. Yeah, this very long ears. And Myanmar, and maybe you are surprised with your teeth, black teeth. Everybody wants to have a white smile of Hollywood, but in Myanmar, this is actually, it's a remedy that is put on teeth to protect your teeth from caries, and only wealthy people who could afford it could use it. So now it's a symbol of wealthy people, and it's another kind of standard of beauty. North American Indians and Morocco African women. Well, and speaking about culture, it's not only this. We have these musical instruments that you can recognize. And just a second, I'd like you to hear how each instrument sounds. Not each, but some of them. This is Indian sitar, very famous musical instrument. Just a couple of seconds. Don't worry, it's for time's sake, I know. Yeah, and then we have, I will cry, it's Ukrainian bandura. Very melodic ancient instrument. And next, Siberian part, part of Yakutia. Okay, and now you will easily recognize this instrument. Yeah, marimba esmeraldeña. Yeah, so speaking about culture, all those components, all those elements that I just shared with you, they represent culture. Well, and in other words, culture is a community's language as well, because language and culture simply cannot be separated. They cannot be put apart, because language is a culture, culture is a language, and communication language is a part of a communication, right? Even if we speak about verbal, non-verbal, but still communication. So it's also part of a culture and part of a discourse. Well, and language is the utmost representation of culture and it's a part of culture, and so they cannot be separated. And why I'm saying this, imagine you are in an international airport and you hear someone speaking your language, the same language, Spanish. However, you will immediately identify whether this person is from Colombia, of your native Ecuador, or whatever, because of some words like ñaño, ñaña, typical Ecuadorian, or oye, güey, Mexican, right? Yeah, so also this is part of linguistic identity and a part of language and communication. Well, so language also shapes our behavior, because we behave according to culture and we express our behaviors through language we use. And so understanding how human beings feel, respond, believe, and value is an exceedingly important aspect of foreign language acquisition. So when we learn a new language, it's not only a matter of phonology, phonetics, articulation, vocabulary, but also some rules, because some rules of behavior are necessary, because you know that English nowadays, it's a lingua franca. It's like a bridge of communication between people who speak different languages. That's why it's so important. And successful communication is a complex issue. Well, and why I present this language as a system, explanation why language is a system. I have already mentioned several times repeatedly mentioned that language is a part of a culture, and this is actually, it's true, especially when we speak about paralinguistic elements. Well, what is paralinguistic? It stands for body language, facial expressions, gestures, cultural behavior differences, discourse elements. So in this level, we can find so many differences. Even if we speak patterns of speech, grammar, vocabulary, etc., we have good knowledge of this. But when we are going to speak about body language, facial expressions, and I'm going to illustrate it later, yeah, so you will see how it's important and how strikingly different languages are, and communication may become really harsh and difficult if you don't know those differences, and if you are not aware of those differences that exist. Well, let us continue. Speaking about communication, so communication and culture and intercultural communication, this is what you need to know. So communication, you already know, it's a process of using words, signs, behaviors to exchange information, to express your ideas. And culture, it's our collective identity. Why it is collective identity? Because in whole society that you belong to, you identify yourself as a part of Ecuadorians. Why? Because you share traditions, you share food, you share music, well, etc. In my country, Ukraine, I also identify myself as Ukrainian because I speak different language. We have different traditions, clothes, food, etc. Yeah. So culture is our collective identity. What unites us as a group? What it's a how can I say? It's a concept of sameness, to be the same, sameness. Yeah, so we feel the same. So it's our collective identity. So intercultural communication, communication between culture. And here we have the key point that we need to decode message correctly. And this is very important because we all have pre-wired information deeply rooted in our brain, in memory. We learn it from a very young age, how we have to decode those messages in our native language. So when we are exposed to another language, different codes, so this is exactly where miscommunication can occur. So speaking about communication, we need to mention sender, who sends a code or message, and receiver, who is supposed to know what the message means and decode it or comprehend. And it can be a reaction, can be positive if a receiver can decode the message and provide feedback. Hello, how are you? I am fine, thank you. So a receiver received the message, could understand it, decode the message correctly, and it will have positive outcome. Well, and to illustrate what I have said so far, look at these images. Probably it's because, well, actually they are from traditional dancer from India. Why I chose this? Well, because I am passionate about Indian culture also, and each gesture in Indian classical dance has special meaning. And so maybe we cannot interpret those messages because I do not know how to decode them, but people who are part of this culture, they can clearly identify the message using the dancer is using during, well, her performance. And each gesture has its own meaning. The same is true for Birma. This is part of Birman dance. And look at her eyes, a little bit over-exaggerated, open eyes, right? But it's a part of their culture. And this movement of her eyes, they have a very special meaning. Yeah, so this is to illustrate what how culture is and how we can decode the message. Well, now let's come closer to the topic of this conference. It's intercultural competence. Let me define it very briefly because, well, I know that time is limitation. So speaking about intercultural competence, we can say that this is ability to establish and develop positive attitudes toward cultural differences. Why I emphasize this? Because when you find with different customs, with different traditions, first idea what comes to our mind is kind of rejection, right? This person behaves a little bit strange, a little bit not as is expected, yeah, and so this sometimes may lead to like stigmatization, like, well, rejection, yeah. Well, so establishing a positive attitude is extremely important, especially in this globalized world. Well, also, intercultural competence stands for ability to communicate effectively and appropriately with people from other language and cultural backgrounds. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, English nowadays represents kind of like a bridge or lingua franca between speakers who speak different native languages, and obviously all those speakers have their cultural luggage or baggage that they are learned, and it will interfere somehow in communication. So when we know a little bit more about how people behave or about different cultures, at least in general form, it will help us to improve our communication and make it more successful. And actually, this is a very difficult task of English foreign language teacher. Well, yeah, and since topic of this conference, intercultural competence, let me define very briefly what competence stands for. Competence refers to the quality or state of being complement. Actually, this is definition I retrieved from the internet, but basically, in other words, put it simply, competence refers to experience, ability, knowledge, competency, skills, ability. Yeah. So, for example, when you speak about a doctor, physical doctor, you want to go to a medical doctor in a clinic, so you would like to know how knowledgeable that doctor is, right? So, how competent or how knowledgeable that person is. Yeah. So to put it simply, competence stands for this knowledge, experience that a person possesses, a person has. Well, and actually, this kind of like result of, I'm sorry, term communicative competence originally was outlined and coined by Dale Himes. He was American anthropologist, folklorist, and he introduces this concept of communicative competence, which basically stands for ability to communicate appropriately. For example, when you speak with authorities, you are supposed to use correct, polite language, to use very formal expressions. But when you are with your friends, you can change it and use your language less formal. For example, now this is a scientific conference, so I'm supposed not to use informal words, not standard words. Yeah. Another example, for example, you speak with a child, so it's obvious. It is obvious that with a child you are going to use intentionally simplified language, right? You intentionally will use short sentences, a couple of maybe just 2 words together. You will simplify this level of your knowledge of your language to communicate with the child, right? Yeah. So this is what communicative competence is. Yeah, and communicative competence is also intercultural competence was derived from communicative competence. So communicative competence, ability to speak appropriately according to situation, according to audience, and according to speech event. Yeah, and intercultural competence, as you can understand, it's your ability to speak appropriately during cross-cultural interactions. So it's knowledge of the world cultures. Well, if it is not possible to learn everything about world cultures, but at least basics, because, well, it was another outstanding person, Geert Hofstede, who outlined those famous dimensions, cultural dimensions that explained why people cannot understand each other well, because they belong to different patterns of behavior. Yeah, so knowledge of the world culture is very important. And understanding of the relationship between culture and language, let's say a distinction between verbal, non-verbal communication, and knowing those differences between different cultures, it's very important. And what is more, sensitivity, to create this sensitivity. What is sensitivity? Like acceptance, like tolerance, right? Sensitivity toward cultural stereotypes. Stereotypes I'm going to explain later. It's oversimplified vision. of other culture and related obstacles to successful intercultural communication and creation of tolerance, acceptance, or empathy that also I'm going to explain later. So intercultural competence, as you can see, it's composed of all these important elements, or adaptation of the behavior according to different situations and cultures, and awakening of awareness, conscious, of people's own and others' cultures. Well, and role of intercultural competence in education nowadays cannot be underestimated due to growing role of English, like globalized world. More and more people with different cultural backgrounds want to learn it. So role of intercultural competence in education is, without any doubt, is very important. And what is help our students understand people from different cultural backgrounds and develop ability to successfully, which is part of intercultural competence, stands for knowledge, attitudes, skills, etc. Well, I hope it's okay so far. I try not to speak so fast, but I think it's a part of my nature. I cannot speak slower, but I hope that I am clear. Okay, so intercultural competence also includes identification in critical analysis. What is critical? Critical does not mean criticize. No, critical means reflect on, to find why, to find explanations. And so it's a critical analysis of cultural components and authentic media of communication. And develop this insight into the roles and behavior within specific cultural environment. I think there is a kind of saying, be in Rome, do as Romans do, right? Be in Rome, do as Romans do. So insight into the roles and behavior within specific cultural environment. So if you are in a specific cultural environment, you are supposed to adapt to this and behave accordingly. Yeah. And for example, I had a friend, her husband got a job in one of those Arab Emirates. But she didn't like there because she said that, well, it's absolutely not possible to cover herself with that black hijab, etc. She said temperature is extremely hot, but cover herself with all this black thing, not possible. But she had to do it because if she used this short sleeves blouse, she would not be well seen in the streets. Yeah, so this is what it means: be in Rome, do as Romans do. And also reflection on the cultural factors influencing their own behavior and of others. And the key word here about intercultural competence is application of the knowledge of culture and cultural values to the management of intercultural context. In other words, to behave appropriately according to different contexts. Well, and this is what I announced at the beginning of this conference. The concept of high and low context cultures. Probably you have never heard what it means, what kind of fish it is. Well, and actually this is kind of behavioral patterns that shape relationship of people belonging to this or that culture. And well, what is high and what is low? Actually, this term that was adopted by the famous Geert Hofstede from Holland, I mentioned before. And so low context culture, and this is basically all those English-speaking countries and a part of Europe, US, Canada, Germany, Australia, Switzerland, Scandinavia, North European countries, United Kingdom, and what are main characteristics of this behavior? Main characteristics are like the conversations or relationship are open, rule-oriented. It means that you have to follow certain rules established by that society in order to not be labeled as antisocial, right? So if you want to be accepted by that society, you are supposed to behave accordingly, following those established rules. And it's detail-oriented in communication. And speaking about language, why it's important, communication, language, very direct messages. One spells things exactly what they need. Need for clarification. And actually, I would say that in my culture, well, I'm from Ukraine, in my culture, we also follow this clarification. And actually, sometimes my students can think that teacher is not well. Why? Because I repeat home assignment, what they have to do many, many times. Do you understand what you have to do? Is it clear how the task is? Is it necessary to explain once again? Do I need to repeat again? So need for clarification. So need for clarification, asking, re-asking, and re-asking again. Sometimes here in Ecuador, at least I could see that it was not that well received, but this is part of my culture and part of the culture countries you see. Need for clarification to be absolutely sure that everybody understands perfectly what is going to be done, how it should be done, etc., etc. And today it happened to me. I had a class today with my students, and I sent them assignment. So, and I explained it 5 times. So yes, teacher, we understand. Yes, teacher, we understand. Yeah, but I had to continue following my patterns of my behavior, my communication, and explaining again, and again. Next. Low use of non-verbal elements. So gesticulation like this, it's not acceptable. And I remember when I came here to Ecuador, I have been lived for 4 years before I returned to my country, and I adopted several behavior from my dear Ecuadorian co-citizens. Well, and my sister said, Nina, please behave yourself. I said, what I did wrong? No, you don't use too much gesticulation. Don't use this too much gesticulation. Yeah, because I'm ashamed walking together with you. Yeah, so this is, we in these cultures, non-verbal elements, this body language is not very well seen. And privacy is important, personal space, and the role of speed, time of money. Well, I'm going to focus on time of speed a little bit in a couple of minutes, but I would like to anticipate this, that, for example, in Ecuador and many Latin American countries, you have the so-called small talk. ¿Cómo le va? ¿Cómo está usted? ¿Cómo está su mamita? ¿Cómo está su papito? ¿Cómo está su perrito? ¿Qué tal la novela? Verá, yo vengo aquí porque quiero hablar del tal tema. Yeah, so this is a typical beginning of a conversation. But in my culture and all this that you see, this is the so-called small talk is absolutely waste of time. We don't use this. Yeah, so for example, you start your conversation, you come to, for example, an appointment, and you say, I'm Nina, and I'm here because I want to talk about this, that, and that. So when my first years of Ecuador, it was constant learning, because, well, I was following patterns of behavior that's proper from my culture. And then I could see a kind of like, not rejection, but kind of like not so desirable effect. So I talked to my husband and he said, no, Nina, this is, you don't have to be very straightforward and blunt. You have to first, yeah, okay, no problem. Now I start my conversation with insignificant things, nice scarf, nice weather, etc. Yeah, so it's because actually this is how conversation works. And this is what actually very important to know these elements in order to achieve success in your communication. Well, and in these cultures, there is no concept of face. What is concept of face? It's a public image that you portray or you represent or you want to transmit for others. Example, I know people here in Ecuador, some families that they don't have much income, their budget is very low, they live in a very modest house, their children go to and very low-paid schools, sometimes state schools, etc., etc. But when these people go out to the street, my goodness, they have the best clothes, they use the best perfume, the best shoes. So when you see this person, wow, this person is absolutely successful in his or her life, right? In North America, for example, a millionaire can go to a Carnegie Hall, you know, that Carnegie Hall, New York, it's a Carnegie Hall, it's a very fancy, very expensive showroom. Well, it's not showroom, it's a concert hall. Yeah, and they can go in jeans, in slippers, I don't need to go so far. My son, years ago when he was just in high school students, so we sent him to as an exchange student to California, and he said, Nina, you cannot believe me. Well, my children call me Nina by my name. So he said, Nina, my classmates go to high school in slippers and pajamas. Can you believe it? And I remember how it was he studied here in Loja in one of private schools, and uniform is absolutely mandatory. Yeah, so this is a concept of a public face. Yeah, what I want to say. Well, then we have the so-called high context, and my dear, you belong to this. Latin America belongs to this category of behavior. Well, and it is reflected in this by these characteristics: very high use of non-verbal elements, gestures, facial expressions. Yeah, sometimes they mean much more. And concept of face, it's very strong. And I remember that I'm going to use the same example of my kids when they were kids. Now they are grown up, young men. Sometimes when they forgot to use a tie, like a part of uniform, they were fined como una multa. They were called detention for this, for not completing their uniform. So this public image of face is very important for these countries, Latin America. So here I could see that people think much twice about their image before going out. But it's not like in my country, for example, or in the United States. Yeah. Well, then we have a verbal message is indirect. Do you understand what I mean? Yeah, this facial expression, it cannot be seen in North America. It should be very formal, very straightforward. But do you understand what I want to say? No. So it's not acceptable behavior. It's not acceptable expression. So, and another thing that one talks, and actually, yes, it's true, one talks around the point and embellishes it. And this is very important. For example, I remember my first impression here was when the same topic was announced and re-announced and retold and paraphrased many, many times. Estamos aquí para reunirnos porque queremos hablar, porque estamos en esta reunión. Well, basically the same words, using the same meaning, but using different words. But in low context cultures like North America, you should be very explicit and express yourself very clearly. And space is communal. People stand close to each other during conversation, right? You can share the same time, the same space, and you can even touch during conversation. Oye, escúchame, yeah? But in some cultures, for example, United States, some Muslim cultures, in my culture as well, we try not to touch each other during conversation. Yeah, not to give kisses and hugs when we meet each other. For me, it was striking, absolutely. When I remember I came here to Ecuador and my husband presented me to his friends and they gave me a kiss, I became in shock. I was just gobsmacked by this and said, Edgar, my husband's name. I didn't provoke them. No, Nina, relax. This is typical way how people greet each other. But for my culture is unspeakable in United States as well. Yeah, so this is how we can take. And time is not easily scheduled, right? You can recognize yourself, right? Time is not easily scheduled. And actually, it's another very important aspect about time that, I'm going to focus on it in a second. Low cultures, so in low context, United States, European cultures, message have to be explicit and very specific, very clear. And members of these cultures place emphasis on sending and receiving accurate messages. A need for clarification, what I mentioned before, clarify, and meticulous wording of legal documents, right? Well, and my dear, in your culture, the so-called high culture context, you interpret messages through context, verbal clues. Do you understand me? Yeah, this. And also, members of high cultures look for meaning and understanding of what is not said in body language, in silence, in pauses, in relationship, and empathy. Well, And another important aspect regarding communication between these societies, why it's important to know this, to communicate successfully, achieve this intercultural competence, that in law, United States, etc., face-to-face communication is much more preferable, like video conferences, phone. In high context, my dear, your SMS, email, or X, or what was Twitter before, is very well accepted. Even we receive, well, I have been working for so many years in UTPL, and all official letters come from just email. Yeah, there is no need to present official letter in physical form. Yeah, our authorities just send us formal email letters, and it's well accepted, but it could not be well seen in the United States. Or sometimes we can even send message, like I invited my colleagues to join this participation, sending the message in email. And thank you, my dear colleagues, for joining me. Well, and this is actually the concept of time that I mentioned, and I would like to focus on it because it's very important aspect that impedes sometimes success in communication in cross-cultural encounters. Well, a low context, which is United States, American culture, time is money. Yeah, so I don't have to waste time on conversation. What is the weather? How is your doggy? Did you like soap opera last night? They just go very blunt and go very straightforwardly into the communication. Well, and business people give full attention to one agenda. So everything is outlined. For Monday, I schedule, I have here. For Tuesday, I have that. So if I want to make an appointment, wait, I have to consult my agenda. If I can be part of, accept you. In high context, it's your time is seen as a constant flow to be experienced in the moment. Well, so it's something that's exists here with all my respect, yeah, because time, for example, you are invited for the party at 8, but nobody comes at 8. You will come probably at 9, 9:30, or 10 probably, right? And actually this happened to me. My first celebration of birthday of my son, I invited my women from my country who live here in Loja, and relatives. So only people, women from my country, arrived 2:30 sharp, very punctually. But the rest of people arrived at 4, 4:30, at 5. And for me, it was just such an ordeal to wait. And I became even desperate. Yeah, so this is how it works, right? Tell me if it's true or not. I'm sure that it is. Well, and professionals regularly do several things at the same time. Well, and actually, this is a historical fact. I'd like to comment that I witnessed by myself. That's why I said that all this presentation and all this knowledge is based on my experience, observation in bank. A cashier, one of the bank cashiers. So it's very common that when a bank cashier attends you in bank, he or she talks with the colleagues on the right, on the left side, right? Yeah, it's absolutely normal, and we do not feel kind of offended. But I witnessed a very unusual for me reaction of American person who started to shout to poor this cashier. Because she was speaking with him, and at the same time she was speaking with a colleague on the right, colleague on the left, etc. And this man suddenly became shouting at her furiously, saying, "Are you here to attend me? Please don't." Well, so he was kind of like out of his mind, to my opinion, yeah. And because in North America, if you are speaking with a client, you are supposed to only speak with the client and not to be distracted with the conversation with your colleagues. You see how it's important to know this information, to have this intercultural competence, right? Well, and another thing, well, we all know about deadlines. Deadline is something that exists, but not always functions, right? Deadline is something that mañana, si no mañana, tal vez pasado mañana, si no, en otra semana. Yeah, so deadline is always extended, postponed. But it's not like in my culture or in North America. Deadline means no more chance. It's today or never. Yeah, so it's very strict. Yeah, so this is how it works. Well, and speaking about this speaking about intercultural competence, it's necessary to speak about verbal and non-verbal communication because it's a part of this. Well, as well, intercultural competence, it comprises written and oral verbal codes that play a key role in the culture. And without understanding verbal codes, how we express ourselves, meaning of our words, pragmatics, what I explained in my yesterday conference participation. So verbal code is essential component in connecting with people of another culture. Yeah, so how we understand properly people from different culture is extremely important, right? And let's see this linguistic differences. Greetings. We start our conversation with greetings, right? Look, in Burma, for example, people ask, have you eaten yet? If this expression is asked, you hear this, have you eaten yet? Has comido hoy día? Yeah, how can you interpret it? Probably as an invitation to a restaurant. Oh, thank you. You are going to invite me for a breakfast. But no, in Burma, this is just a typical greeting form because eating, it's a very important part of their culture. That's why it's reflected in their communication in their greeting forms. Or where are you going? ¿A dónde te vas? If someone asks you this way, you may say, well, it's not your business where I'm going. Yeah, I'm going. I tell you. If not, I don't. Yeah, but where are you going? It's just a typical beginning of a conversation. It's a typical greeting. In China, ni hao, famous from Jackie Chan, ni hao, ni hao. Yeah, it means hello. That literally means you good. So I wish you good. Well, and look, these many words. Hello, how are you? It's been such a long, yeah. So all this much wording, it's a part of typical greeting in Morocco, Northern Africa. Yeah. So imagine you to receive this shower of words instead of just saying hello, how are you? This, yeah. So you may feel disturbed, confused, yeah, but this is a typical greeting way of people of Morocco. Furthermore, in Ukraine, for example, my culture, I'm from Ukraine, if you remember, yeah, so the typical greeting is how you are doing, yeah, how you are doing, but we have different meaning, like what is your mood? Well, how you are doing, it's an equivalent that can be translated into English, but basically in my language we have як настрій, it's in Ukrainian, but it has meaning, what is your mood today? How is your mood? Here is not frequently, we ask each other this way, en qué ánimo estás? Yeah, so we don't say hello, but this is a typical greeting in Ukraine, for example. And this, again, based on my experience, it cost me time to understand this. And it's a typical Ecuadorian, ¿Cómo amaneciste hoy? And this was my mother-in-law. She used to greet me this way every morning. Ninita, ¿cómo amaneciste hoy? ¿Cómo es amaneciste? ¿Qué es esto? So for me, it was absolutely not possible to understand. It took me much time to understand what it really means. Yeah, and so it's a part of your culture. So this is a part of intercultural communication. Yeah, understanding all this. And in English, we just have good morning. Good morning. And if you speak about Arab language, you know, Arab language is very rich language. It's like Spanish, Russian. It's very rich language in vocabulary and especially in greeting forms. And luckily, I have friends who live in Arab countries, so they provided me with this information. They never say just good morning. Good morning, simply it does not exist for them. They have Sabah el Nur, which is morning of the bright, pink, golden light. Yeah, so they wish you golden light, pink morning, etc., etc. Or have a bright morning, have a brilliant morning, all like this. Have a happy morning, but not just simple good morning. Have a sunny morning, etc., etc., but not like simple morning. And interesting thing, this, how they wish good night. They don't say good night, they say, may you wake up to good news. Que buenas noticias lo despiertan, right? I think it's amazing way to wish good night to someone. Yeah, so you see how this verbal intercultural communication works. And then we have address forms. Time is against me. Well, this is actually my first visit to Ecuador when I was still a student in my university. So I was deeply impressed by those reinita, mija, mi bonita, preciosa, yeah, in the market. So I said to my husband, I want to come back tomorrow because I want to be called reinita, bonita, preciosa. Yeah, so this is, yeah, but this is a typical greeting forms here in Ecuador. Even people who are much younger than me may address mijita. Mijita, yo, si tenemos como 30 años diferencia, okay, mamita. Yeah, so, but this is how it works, right? Well, and then I'd like to mention this very important phrase, mande. Sorry, mande. Mande, it's a typical form that people here use in Ecuador. Mande mamita, mijito, te llamo, mande mamita. Yeah, so, but actually, what is etymology of this word? It came from those times, it was originated in those times when Spaniards came. The Spaniards came with the power, yeah, with to submit people here for their purposes, right? Yeah, so mande is kind of like a patron master, orders, gives commands to someone. So this poor peasant has to say, mande patroncito, estoy a sus órdenes. Yeah. So well, I know that nowadays the meaning connotation of this meaning changed a little bit. Mande, when you answer to your mom, it does not place you in submissive position. It's just kind of like respectful response. But origin of this expression is like this. Well, let's continue. Well, and values. When we speak about difference in behavioral schemes, it's very important to know about values. For example, in your country, luckily, you have a great respect toward elderly, right? But in Europe, especially in the United States, elderly can be easily sent to nursery houses. Well, but here it's something unspeakable because, well, I have mother-in-law, she is 92. Luckily, she is still well, but I am deeply amazed and gobsmacked by this respect that all her children, grandchildren show to her, and I'm sure that in all your families is the same. But in the United States, and especially in Europe, it's kind of different. Values. Well, when you see in public transportation a person, a handicapped person entering a public transportation, so here in Ecuador, many people immediately will stand up and offer a seat, right? But in Europe, it's not like this because their values are different, not because they are not educated. Values are different. Why? Because when handicapped person enters into public place, everybody pretends not to see a condition of the person. Why? Because that person may feel kind of like offended, or may you may harm the person by noticing his or her physical condition. That's why in public transportation, if a handicapped person enters everybody pretends not to see the person. Yeah, it's due to values. Well, and eating habits. Well, in Ecuador, and like in many countries, we have very sophisticated tableware, and each piece has its own function. But in some cultures, like in India, eating habits do not impose, eating habits impose eating by hands, yeah, not to use tableware. So even highly educated person from a high society will eat rice with hands, not because of lack of education, not because of lack of modalities, table modalities, but because of habits. And once again, from my experience, I had a friend from India, so I asked, why do you eat with hands? And he said, I am sure that my hands are clean. I do not know whether that fork is clean. Yeah, so this is how it works. And very briefly, because time is against me, non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication is very powerful because 90% of communication is nonverbal, believe it or not. It's not what you say, but how you say it, how you say, and how you accompany your explanation with your words. So language of gestures, very important, and it varies from culture to culture. It could be seen in these greeting forms. In Arab, in Maori culture, in Japan, these bows. In Alaska, Eskimo, they're touching their nose. And it actually is interesting why they are touching their nose, because in this way they smell the person, whether the person is healthy or not. Believe it or not, but I read about this region of this greeting, touching their nose. They try to perceive if the person is healthy, not sick, whether the person has good health, because, well, person has problems, make it bad breath and other smells, right? Yeah, so this is part of this. And this is actually hugs and kissing. My husband was deeply impressed when he saw that in my culture, men can give kisses. It doesn't have to do absolutely anything, is not connected with sexual orientation. It's just because of traditions. Yeah, so they have to hug and give kisses 3 times, in one here, here, and here again. Yeah, so it's a typical greeting just for very close people. For example, father and son, father and husband of a daughter. Yeah, so it's for just for very close relatives. Yeah, and if we do not understand the meaning of how we have to breathe, it also can lead to misunderstanding and confusion, right? Look, next, this is a typical, this is Barack Obama. I hope you recognized him. This is a typical gesture, and actually this gesture stands for floor holding body posture. It means I am boss here. I am the one, right? But showing soles of shoes is considered as extremely offensive gesture in many cultures, including including some African cultures. I remember, this was a historical, historical fact that in one of African cultures, there was a resurrection and they asked help from North America and they sent help, but people, soldiers, African soldiers, started to shoot against them. So why? Yeah, and because in that in that African culture, showing souls to someone is extremely offensive gesture. So when they saw American soldiers hanging this way, how you see in this picture, with the shoes and obviously showing their soles, African soldiers interpreted this as offensive gesture, and they started to shoot against American help. Yeah, and it was another historical fact. One of Iranian journalist took a shoe and threw it against North American Prime Minister as a sign of disrespect to this person. And it happened, if I'm not mistaken, 5-6 years ago. Well, so speaking about hand gestures, we have also different gestures. Like this is typical when speaking about hate of someone. I used to say, my son is growing so fast this way. And my colleague say, no, Nina, don't show this. We have to express this. I say, but it's not clear. This. It's not clear how tall my son is. No, again, this gesture we show for donkeys, etc., but not for humans. But in my culture, we use this. Yeah, so hand gestures, it's another very important aspect to consider. Okay, well, very fast, more about gestures. Just look at these images, yeah, how we can express this. And yeah, more gestures that have absolutely different meanings in different cultures. Non capisco. It's Italian gesture. It's a typical, right? Yeah, Italian gesture. Sandrita, I see you are here, so you know what it means, yeah, because you speak Italian language, right? Okay, and patting head of a child, it's a typical gender gesture in our culture, in your culture as well, but is not well seen in Asian cultures because head is considered to be one of the most sacred body parts. So don't touch head of children if you are in Asia. Yeah, okay. Well, and now facial expressions. Also, United States is known as a pro-smiling culture. Yeah, so they smile because they want to portray themselves or transmit their happiness, their success through smiles. But in Japan, for example, expression emotions in public is not well seen, and smiling is not as frequently used in Asia, especially Japan, Korea, or China. Yeah, so you are supposed not to express any emotions, be like neutral, yeah, and not express your happiness, your sadness, anything, absolutely be neutral. So your face is kind of like enigma. Nobody knows what feelings you have inside. And if you were my students yesterday, if you were my listeners in my yesterday's lecture, I mentioned that in Japan, there was a famous case that in a funeral of a child, mother and father both were not crying in the funeral of their child. It's not because mother and father are heartless, they feel anything about the deceased son. It's because in their culture, showing emotions in public simply is kind of like a not well seen gesture. So imagine this, yeah. Well, so this is what, yeah. And next, very briefly to continue, it's about facial expressions, yes versus no. And actually, this happens to one of North American tourists who went to Thailand, and he wanted to buy a bottle of water, and he could not achieve it because gesture. Do you have a water? The gesture was like this, yeah. So he misinterpreted this gesture, but actually, this gesture, eyebrow up means yes, yeah. And in India, maybe you saw movies of Jackie Chan.
Sorry to interrupt you, Professor Nina, but we cannot see your slides. Something is wrong. Sorry.
But I did not change anything in my presentation, really, such a pity. So I do not know what is wrong. Such nice slides I have. Such a pity because I'm sharing all my slides.
The last slide, it was address forms and requests.
Oh, such a pity, such a pity. So let me try again.
Estimada Nina, por cuestiones energéticas, me comunican que en 5 minutos se va a ir la luz donde nosotros, se va a ir la energía eléctrica donde estamos ubicados. Si por favor podemos simplificar un poco para poder culminar con éxito en 5 minutos la ponencia respectiva o su conferencia magistral, estimada Nina. Mi disculpa de antemano por las situaciones que se nos están presentando.
Such a pity that you could not see my slides. Okay, so I'm going to finish. Yeah, such a pity. Yeah, so I'm going to conclude. Unfortunately, I feel very sad because of this. So you cannot see my slides, right? No.
No, Professor.
Such a pity, I can't understand why. Okay, so from what I have explained, and also it's stereotyping, it's another very important aspect that it's oversimplified vision. So you cannot see nothing. You cannot see anything. No. So I cannot do anything. I can't understand why. Because the most interesting was coming. Well, so for time's sake and for everything, so I would like to say that it's very important to be culturally competent, to know those differences, to understand those differences, and at least to know basics of communication, basics of those differences in verbal, nonverbal communication, and to help our students as English teachers to become culturally aware. I'm really sorry, I do not know why you cannot see the slides, because I have internet, etc. So if you have questions, you may go ahead. I feel kind of frustrated that you cannot see my slides because they are bright, nice, and yeah, please, Carlos. Carlos, you have a question. I see that you have a question. Go ahead with your question, Carlos. Yeah,
Thank you very much. First, I am glad to be here. Greetings to you and to all